Hello, welcome to the final lesson on radio and the Archers as our set product. This lesson is about industry and regulation, and our learning objectives are to develop an understanding of how the BBC is a public service broadcaster and to develop our understanding of how radio is regulated by an organisation called Ofcom. So the BBC is, as we said, a British public service broadcaster which has a mission, and its mission is to inform, educate and entertain. What do you think about those as values? Is it important that a broadcaster has values? Does it need them? And what do you think of those specific values? Now, the BBC is funded by an annual TV licence fee. That costs about £155 a year, and in return for this, the BBC have to provide a range of broadcasting that will benefit the public. The BBC calls these their public purposes, and they lay them out in a royal charter, which is awarded by the government and is renewed every few years, most recently in 2016. So, watch this video about the BBC Charter, have a think about what it means.
2016 is a big year for the BBC. It sees the BBC renegotiate its charter with the government. The BBC is a massive cultural institution that represents over 70% of the TV market, 70% of the radio market and a huge amount of online news. In 2015, a newly elected Conservative government appointed John Whittingdale to the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Former personal aide to Margaret Thatcher and close friend of Rupert Murdoch, it will be John Whittingdale's task to renegotiate the BBC Charter and the licence fee. Many have described his appointment as a war on the BBC, but Open Democracy editor David Elstein says he's not anti-BBC and is in fact a wise choice by David Cameron. In 2015, John Whittingdale released a scathing report into the state of the BBC and suggested it was biased. Many Conservative commentators and corporate press offices suggest the BBC has a left-wing bias, that it is inherently liberal, there are no right-wing comedians, and that it focuses too much on diversity and not enough on national values. But studies from Loughborough University and Cardiff University show in fact that the BBC is nationalistic, Eurosceptic, pro-big business and pro-government. The research also showed that the BBC showed a large institutional bias against the Labour Party and all progressive parties in the last general election. Whittingdale has suggested that the BBC scrap the licence fee, decriminalise it and replace it with a voluntary subscription fee. This will cost the BBC at least £200 million a year and threatens the idea of a universal service. Because the licence fee is seen as regressive, everyone pays the same, some have suggested a German-style household fee attached to your council tax band would be a more progressive and fairer way of funding the BBC. Other threats to the BBC income include top slicing, which is where the BBC have to pay for other services even though it's not in their remit. Currently the BBC is being asked to pay for the World Service, the digital rollout and for over 75s to have a free licence fee, even though this isn't in the BBC Charter or in their remit. The licence fee, much like this field, has been frozen since 2010. The licence fee freeze has cost the BBC 16% of its income so far. It is set to cost it a further 10% over the next 5 years. Another way Whittingdale is looking to redirect licence fee money is towards regional papers and private broadcasters. The idea to support local press sounds like a good one, but this in effect would be a public subsidy to private companies through you, the licence fee payer. With all these major changes, the big question is the licence fee value for money? For 40p a day, we the British public get over 100,000 hours of public service broadcasting. The licence fee also funds 50% of Channel 4. Sky, for 66p a day, offers you 35 channels, but with no sport, it's just the basic package and it's riven with advertising. The question that faces us is, do we want this more privately owned model or public service broadcaster, paid for by all, universally available to all?
Okay, so an interesting debate there that will be had for many years to come, all about whether or not the BBC's value for money and its importance. Do some more research into this and make notes on the BBC's public purposes. And then you should be able to come to a decision. What would happen if there were no BBC? You know, if we were only left with what we call commercial broadcasters like Sky or ITV. What happens to programmes on TV? What happens to representations as well? And to understand that a little bit more, we might have to look at some of the public service broadcasting ethos and the philosophies that they have. So here are just the headlines of some of these: to provide impartial news and information to help people understand and engage with the world around them, to support learning for people of all ages, to show the most creative, highest quality and distinctive output and services, to reflect, represent and serve the diverse communities of all of the UK's nations and regions, and in doing so support the creative economy across the UK, to reflect the United Kingdom, its culture and its values to the world. So which of these do you think is the most important and why? And do you think it's important that we keep the BBC so there are broadcasters that actually do all of these things? And the fact that the BBC does all of these things and has these goals, do you think, in your opinion, it makes the BBC value for money? And if so, why? And if not, why not? So the BBC is actually the world's biggest public service broadcaster. Not many nations still have them at all. Most of them are entirely commercial broadcasters. And the services that are included as part of your licence fee are 9 TV channels, 10 national radio stations, including as well as 40 local and regional radio stations, the World Service, an online and interactive service, as well as their website. It's a huge amount, but obviously we're going to focus on radio. Now, BBC Radio is a service which provides national radio stations that cover a majority of musical genres, as well as local radio stations covering local news, affairs and interests, such as Radio Merseyside. Here are the national radio stations, and each radio station has its own target audience and its own distinctive style of programming and content. So if we look at some of the marketing for these radio stations, we should be able to tell what they specialise in. So for example, let's first of all watch this advert for Radio 1. How does Radio 1 make it clear who their target audience is through this advert?
This is where it begins.
Where passion begins.
Where inspiration begins.
Where pride,
ambition, discovery begins.
Where discussion begins.
Where opportunity begins.
Where potential begins.
Give it out, get it back.
BBC Radio 1, where it begins.
Obviously, the repeated phrase of where it begins suggests something at the start of people's lives or near the beginning. The music itself and the imagery of young people and young artists, as well as that central focus of the woman with the headphones on, nodding along to the beats, just that it's a very youth-orientated audience, okay, with maybe a variety of genres that would target a youth audience. The idea that is repeated, that this is it celebrates diversity and inclusivity, but without doubt a younger audience here. Okay, well, BBC Radio 2 is for an older target audience, generally speaking, but let's look at this rather playful and clever advert which uses a lot of special effects seamlessly, I would say. But how does this reveal its attitude towards music in general?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce some members of my group to you before we go any further. On backing vocals, the Sugar Babes. The man with the beautiful voice, Mr. Marvin Gaye. On the lead guitar is Jimmy Page. On the rhythm guitar, Noel Gallagher. And on the drums, Keith Moon. On bass guitar, Sheryl Crow. And finally on piano, the legendary Stevie Wonder. Hey, Stevie.
Now, obviously, seeing that several members of that supergroup were dead well before the advert was made, and of course, there's much younger versions of Jimmy Page and Stevie Wonder featured in there. A really interesting and playful advert, but of course celebrates music no matter what genre it's from, as long as it's good quality, and also celebrates people's love of a variety of genres of music and of course live music as well, understanding and recognising that some musicians such as Elvis or Keith Moon or Noel Gallagher are just iconic as part of the industry. So a real celebration of music and its variety and the love of music, and that's very much the content of Radio 2 and its ethos. So moving on to Radio 4. What does this advert emphasise about the content of Radio 4?
What can you do in 4 minutes? Boil an egg. Change a light bulb. Perhaps. But with Radio 4 in 4 minutes, it's long enough to feed your curiosity. To discover that much of what we eat isn't actually food. Why music depends on imperfection. Whether we should sacrifice our freedom to feel safe. And if an ant could save your life. Explore Radio 4 in 4 online. Where will 4 minutes take you?
So again, this is a real focus on the content of this radio station and how it's there to intrigue and interest you. A place full of information, a place full of that will educate you, that will provide you with the building blocks of an interesting general knowledge, as it were, but also, of course, emphasising that this is from a really wide variety of topics, whether that's culture and entertainment or science or sociology. Everything's covered here. And that takes us on a little bit more to how radio audiences are often defined, and as well as their content. And we have this term profile. This term profile refers to how different stations are defined through their brand identity. This may be defined by their presenters, for example, or the programme style. And of course it would include their aims and their ethos, their ideology, if you like. So do a little bit of research into each of these radio stations and what they specialise in, including Radio 4, so that you've got your own mini profile of each national BBC station. Of course, our focus is going to be much more on Radio 4, because this is where our set text lives. Radio 4 is a mixed speech radio station which offers in-depth news and current affairs, as well as a wide range of other speech programmes, including dramatisations, readings, lots of comedy shows, factual documentaries, as well as magazine programmes. So there's no music, specifically no radio music programmes, unless music appears within the shows. So you want a bit more detailed information about this network or this station, so visit Radio 4's website and look at the way they present their homepage, look at the type of content they produce, as well as the people and celebrities who feature. And let's have an answer. Who do you think the target audience is for Radio 4? So Radio 4 is often accused, and it has to be said, jokes about itself, of being almost exclusively for a middle-class audience. If we have a look here at the BBC 4, Radio 4, the remit of Radio 4 is to be a mixed speech service offering in-depth news, current affairs and a wide range of other speech services. As we've said, the service should appeal to listeners seeking intelligent programmes in many genres which inform, educate and entertain. So it's not really much different from the main ethos of the BBC in general. So why have they got this tag of being for a middle class audience? Well, it's often based on the aspects of the celebrities used, the subjects that are covered, but also sometimes that it's considered more highbrow than other content or more intelligent. But is that a fair accusation? Let's have a look at a snippet of an article written in the Standard. It's certainly true that a lot of Chardonnay and claret drinkers listen to Radio 4, and why not? Radio 4, after all, revels in debate and analysis, and its wildly eclectic schedule provides programmes about almost anything political, cultural, or for that matter, wine quaffing, or even beer drinking interest you might have. The truth about Radio 4 is that if you listen to it with an open mind, it is clearly not designed to shut any particular demographic in or out. When I last looked at the figures, most Radio 4 listeners did not have a university degree. More were from outside the M25 than within it. That's the road that circles London. Well over 1 million were under 35 and so on. There is one qualification only, and it straddles class, geography, age and race. You need to be interested in intelligent speech, and that is enough. So read the full article from the Standard. What do you think? Is this a classist accusation to say that Radio 4 is just for middle class people because it's for more intelligent? Or actually, does that mean it should engage anybody who's interested in in-depth conversation regardless of what class they come from? Well, of course, our job is to apply all of these ideas to the Archers, our set product. Before we do that, let's just quickly remind ourselves of some of the responsibilities of the BBC as a public service broadcaster. To provide impartial news and information that help people understand and engage with the world around them. To support learning for all people of all ages. To show the most creative, highest quality and distinctive output and services. To reflect, represent and serve the diverse communities of the UK, nations and regions, and in doing so support the creative economies across the United Kingdom. To reflect the UK, its cultures and values to the world. In what ways do you feel the Archers helps the BBC meet these public purposes? Well, some of the things you might have picked up on was that the Archers was originally established to educate farmers. The show soon became a major source of entertainment for people from all walks of life, not just the rural community. However, of course, the show still prides itself on the quality of its research and its ability to portray real rural life in Britain. The question is, do you agree with this? So moving sideways, I suppose, into the area of regulation. And just as the film industry is regulated by the BBFC and video games are regulated by PEGI, radio is regulated by Ofcom. Now, remember, regulation is about a set of guidelines which producers must follow in order to ensure that children are protected from content that may harm them. And in the case of Ofcom, offers audiences a place to complain about a broadcast. Here's the Ofcom logo. Just do a bit of research. Who are Ofcom? What do they do? And what does Ofcom stand for? So you may have found from your research that Ofcom is the Office of Communications, a branch of government regulatory body that makes sure that, like we said, with just as BBFC and PEGI are keeping people safe from harm, that there is a code that broadcasters work to, both TV and radio. And here are some of those broadcasting codes. The principle of ensuring that people under 18 are protected. So look at some of these in more depth, particularly code 1.3 and 1.5. Children must also be protected by appropriate scheduling from material that is unsuitable for them. Although scheduling requirements in this section are not relevant to the provision of programmes on demand, the BBC must put in place appropriate measures on BBC ODPS that provide equivalent protection for children. And that radio broadcasters must have particular regard to times when children are particularly likely to be listening. Well, think about this. What time is the Archers on? Does that protect children from the content? Next principle. To ensure that generally accepted standards are applied to the content of TV and radio services so as to provide adequate protection for members of the public from the inclusion in such services of harmful and offensive material. Well, there's a number of rules below here that you can read through. Once you've done that, decide, is there any content which you feel is likely to cause harm and offence on the Archers? Well, it's interesting to see what your answers are for that question as to whether you feel that the Archers may cause harm and offence. If people are offended, they can actually complain to Ofcom via their website. But generally speaking, people don't find too many issues with the Archers. Here's just a snippet of some of the complaints that were made over the past few years. A few there from 2016, you can see, commenting on episodes that maybe portrayed violence and dangerous behaviour. That was probably the episodes surrounding the storyline involving Helen and Rob and the domestic violence storyline, and after obviously Helen stabbing Rob. One account of offensive language, and another one in 2012. And at the very top there, from 2006, someone complaining about sex, representations of sex and nudity. Obviously someone with a good imagination to complain about the representation of sex on a radio show, or nudity certainly on a radio show. But there we go, as you can see, that's just a few complaints, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 complaints over the past, 15 years or so. So it's not a show that generally people complain about, so it doesn't have to bash heads with Ofcom too much. But it's important that you know how radio is regulated. The exam may require you to discuss and to explain the regulation of radio. But of course, there are lots of other industry elements as part of this lesson, particularly that remit of the public service broadcasting and how important that is as well. So there we go, that's the end of the Archers. Lots of information there for you to retain and possibly for you to answer about in an examination. Thanks very much.